Florina Simion was a 25-year-old girl from the small town of Kitsago in the province of Venice, where she lived with her family. She had a history of drug addiction and had a problem in her right leg, which caused her to limp. She also suffered from epilepsy, for which she was taking medications. Florina worked at the Giuliani Middle School in Dallo as a janitor. At the school, she met 56-year-old Mauricio de Granz. Both got into a relationship soon after. Mauricio would persuade her to stop attending Katsuri Association in Dallo, where she would regularly go to seek assistance for her drug addiction. On February 26, 2016, Florina would leave her house at 7:30 p.m. in order to celebrate her boyfriend's birthday with him. She exchanged some text messages with her boyfriend, Mauricio, who told her that he was going to have dinner and would call her later. She then called her friend Daniels. Both would talk on the phone for some time before Florina would abruptly hang up the phone. She would then send strange, incomprehensible messages to her boyfriend in repeated Italian words that made no sense. Mauricio called her back as soon as he saw the message, but no one answered the call. The next day, when Florina didn't arrive back home, her family reported her missing. Strangely enough, Mauricio never notified her parents or the police that Florina was missing. The police launched a massive search for the missing girl. Interestingly, Florina was not carrying her medications for her epilepsy with her on that day, even though she'd kept it with her at all times in the past. In the days before her disappearance, it had rained a lot, and because Florina had a problem walking, police believe that it is possible that she slipped and fell into the nearby river Brenta and was carried away by the current. Divers searched the Brenta River, but to no avail. The only lead that police could find was that Florina's phone was last active in the town of Dallo, which was around 7.5 kilometers from her home, around 8 p.m. The police would only search for 3 days before calling it off dating. The girl had run away, however. Her parents do not believe this. Her mother believed she was killed. She stated that before her disappearance, Florina was threatened and beaten several times by a man who was interested in her. Florina had rejected him multiple times, and once he'd reportedly threatened her with a knife. Florina's case had not gained much attention, and it remains unsolved to this day. Her mother continues to search for answers. Pier Paolo Pasolini was an Italian film director, poet, writer, and intellectual. Pier remains one of Italy's most controversial public figures due to his blunt style and focus on some of his works on taboo, intimate matters. Besides being a gifted film poet and intellectual, he identifies himself as homosexual, Marxist, and Catholic. In the early morning hours of November 2, 1975, several weeks before his extremely controversial film, Solo, or The 120 Days of Sodom, was to be released, Pier's mutilated corpse would be found on a beach. In Ostia, he had been run over by a car several times. An autopsy concluded that he had multiple broken bones, and his private parts were crushed by a metal bar. His body had been partially burned with gasoline. After his death, just a few hours before Peter's body was found, police had arrested 17-year-old teenage male prostitute Giuseppe Piano Pelosi for speeding in an Alfa Romeo. The police also accused him of stealing the car. When the stolen car was determined to belong to Pier, Giuseppe confessed to his murder. Giuseppe told the police that Pier had picked him up for sex on the night of November 2, 1975. He first took him to a restaurant and then to a beach. Pied had then asked Giuseppe to do something personal, having to do with a wooden stick. But when Giuseppe refused, Pier snapped and struck him with the wooden stick. In self-defense, Giuseppe grabbed the stick and struck Pier in the head, hitting him in the private parts and then beating him to death. He then fled in his car, hitting what he thought was a bump. Giuseppe asserted that he acted alone. Giuseppe was convicted for Pier's murder. However, Pier's friends, family, and fans were not convinced. They thought that the brutality of the crime was impossible to have been committed by one thin, 17-year-old boy, and that The attack was carried out by more than one person. Furthermore, there were several contradictions in Giuseppe's confession regarding the crime scene details. A green sweater was found in the car that belonged neither to Pier nor Giuseppe, and a bloody handprint of Pier's was found on the roof of the passenger seat. But there was barely any bloodstains on Giuseppe. Some motorcycle riders and a car was seen following Giuseppe in the Alfa Romero before he was stopped by the police. Then 29 years later, on May 7, 2005, Giuseppe retracted his confession in a televised interview, claiming he was innocent and had confessed under the threat of violence. To his family, he said that two brothers and another man with a southern accent had killed Pied, calling him a, quote, queer and a dirty communist, as they beat him to death. In 2005, evidence would be uncovered that suggested that Pier had been murdered by an extortionist. A friend of Pier said Joseph G. launched his own investigation into his death and concluded that some of the rolls of film from Salo or the 120 Days of Sodom had been stolen. Pier was killed while negotiating with the group of thieves. It was thought that he was possibly killed by members of the notorious Maliana gang. In 2014, DNA samples taken from the clothes that Pier was wearing on the night revealed traces belonging to at least 3 different people. Giuseppe was released on probation in 1983. Following his initial release, he was arrested on a range of charges, from drug dealing, illegal possession of drugs, and thefts to bank robberies. Over recent years, he had been running a bar in Testaccio, Rome. More recently, in 2017, Giuseppe passed away at the age of 59 due to lung cancer. Pieta's murder remains shrouded in mystery to this day. Wilma Montesi, he was born in Rome in 1932. She came from a modest background, though she dreamed of becoming an actress. She was engaged to Angelo Giuliano, a policeman, and had planned to get married on Christmas in 1953. On April 9, 1953, Wilma's mother, Maria, and sister Wanda decided to go to the cinema. Wilma declined their offer to join them, as she was not keen on films featuring Anna Mariani, and said that she probably would go for a walk instead. Around 5 p.m., Wilma left her house and headed to the San Paulo train station. When Marie and Wanda returned home, Wilma wasn't there. Wilma did not arrive home for dinner that night, and her family reported her missing to the police. Strangely, she left her ID card at the house and wasn't wearing jewelry that her fiancé gifted her, which she usually wore when she went out. Her family later claimed that she had no knowledge of public transportation. However, it is certainly plausible that she had access to the information necessary to cross town. It is unclear whether she was on the train or not, but a few witnesses claim to have seen her board the train from Rome to Ostia. She was then reported to have been seen at a cafe near a beach in Ostia. The owner of a kiosk selling postcards located near the beach claimed to have spoken to someone who looked like Wilma and said that she bought an illustrated postcard and intended to send it to her fiancé in Baldenza. 2 days later, on April 11, 1953, her body was found on the beach of Thorvionica. Near Rome, she was lying face down in the sand, was partially dressed, and wasn't wearing her shoes, skirt stockings, or garter belt. An autopsy determined that she wasn't sexually assaulted. No traces of drugs or alcohol was found in her system. Police quickly ruled her death as accidental. According to the police, Wilma went to dip her feet in the water in order to relieve herself of the itchiness that her ex among her heels was causing. They said she took her shoes, socks, and garter belt off and then dived in the water when she must have suddenly fallen ill. She then fainted and finally drowned. They claimed a coroner said her sudden illness was because she was menstruating. A few months after her death, a newspaper called Adelita published an article that claimed her death was not an accident. A Roman actress named Adriana Conjeta di Sacca claimed that on that day, she had participated in an Eyes Wide Shut Al Sawyer with Wilma at the nearby state of Copacciato, which was owned by an elderly nobleman, Marx Ugo Montagna. Wild parties were a regular thing at the property and were attended by women hoping to become actresses. Adriana said that afterwards, Bima overdosed on opium and passed out, after which she was dumped at the beach, where she was left to die. The paper's editor, Savannah Muto, was charged with spreading false and tendentious news to disturb public order and was taken to court. Adriana, frightened, denied her declarations to support his claims. Silvano then brought in the Milanese aristocrat, Maria Augusta Gallio, who was a former mistress of Marx. Maria said that Bill might have taken her place as Marquez's mistress, and alleged that Marquez ran a drug ring, along with his musician friend, Piero Gianni, the son of a foreign minister. She also claimed they were behind the disappearances of a number of other young women, and that the local authorities had been bribed to keep things quiet and to close the case. This testimony caused an uproar in the public, and both the foreign minister and the chief of police, Saverio Polito, resigned from their posts. Public opinion regarding the case was polarized. Marquez, Piero Piccioni, and the chief of police were all tried for their alleged crimes, but all three were later acquitted. Savannah was sentenced to 2 years in jail for slander, while Adriana got 10 months, and Maria was sentenced to 2 years in prison. It is unknown what happened to Wilma that night, and her death still remains unsolved. Simonetta Ferrero was a 26-year-old woman who lived with her family in Milan. On Saturday, July 24th, in 1971, around 10 a.m., Simonetta left her home to run a few errands for her upcoming 2-week family vacation in Corsica. At 10:37, she went to a bookstore in Corso Magenta to buy an Italian or French dictionary, and she probably then went to exchange lire to francs. At around 11 a.m., she went to an upholstery shop to drop a piece of fabric off. In Corso Vergelli, she then goes to a perfumery, where she buys some cosmetics and leaves. Around 11:30 a.m., she had an appointment at a beautician, but would never make it for her appointment. Her family waited for her at lunch around 1 p.m., but when she didn't arrive home by 4 p.m., they reported her missing to police. On Monday morning, July 26th, at about 9 a.m., a 21-year-old seminarian, Mario Torso, was walking through the corridors of Cattolica University after attending an 8 o'clock mass. On his way, while passing by a woman's bathroom near the stairs of Block G, he heard water running from an unclosed tap in the bathroom. Since he was in charge of the management of the bathrooms and dormitories in his seminary, he got agitated by the wastage of water and went to the bathroom to turn off the tap. As he entered into the bathroom, he noticed the door handle was covered in blood, and there was blood on the floor and on the door itself nearby. He found Simonetta lying on the floor in the middle of the bathroom, covered in blood. Horrified, Mario immediately notified the custodian, and the police were called in. An autopsy concluded that she had suffered 33 stab wounds, 7 of which were fatal. Her body was clothed, and there were no signs of sexual abuse. Her gold jewelry and money were found on her. Nothing was taken. She had wounds on her hands, suggesting she had fought with her attacker and had grabbed the knife with her bare hands. Several times bits of the killer's skin was also found under her fingernails. A bloody handprint left by the killer was found on the wall using the handprint. The police determined the killer was likely between 5'9" to 6 feet in height. The coroner determined the murder took place somewhere between 12 a.m. and 2 p.m. on July 24th. It is unknown why Simonetta had gone to the university that day, given that she had graduated from it 2 years earlier. 2 theories were put forward by the police. First was that she had gone to the university to use the bathroom, however. It still doesn't explain why she went to the bathroom on the Block G rather than using the one near the entrance of the university. The second theory put forward was that she had gone there to grab a brochure for a friend on the Faculty of Law. However, neither of the theories have been confirmed. Police questioned the people present on the campus. On July 24th, the university was empty, except for 4 construction workers who were working on the first floor and the custodian. The workers said they work with jackhammers, which probably drowned out the victim's screams. The workers worked from morning to 1 p.m. had lunch and then resumed to work until 5 p.m., after which the custodian closed the university for the weekend. None of the people present had heard or seen anyone entering or leaving the premises. Maya would be considered a suspect early in the investigation, but would soon be cleared. Investigators also followed a lead about some men who had harassed female students at the university, but nothing came of it. Investigators looked into Simonetta's personal life, but couldn't find anything. She was a serious, hard-working girl and did not have a boyfriend, nor did she have any enemies. Police have followed several leads over the years, but so far nothing is turned up. There have been no suspects in the case, and it remains unsolved. Leonarda Polvani, also known as Leah, was a 28-year-old woman who lived near Bologna, Italy. She was a jewelry designer and had been happily married to a philosophy teacher for about a year. On the evening of November 29, 1983, Leah went to visit a friend at around 5 p.m. in Bologna to show her some jewelry. Leah and her friend then visited another friend's house and spent some time there. Leah left her friend's house at around 7:15 p.m. with her car. This was the last time anyone saw her alive. Leah wouldn't return to her house that night. At 9 p.m., her concerned husband called his in-laws to check if they had seen Leah. They had not. He called several family members and friends, but no one had seen her. Her husband then decided to go and look for her. He opened the garage door and found Leah's car in the garage. The engine was still warm. However, Leah was nowhere to be found. Leah had apparently disappeared in those 5 meters, which separated her garage from her home's door. At 11 p.m., her husband called the police and reported her missing. The police immediately launched the search party for her. 4 days later, 2 gamekeepers came across Leah's body while patrolling an area in San Lazzaro de Salvina, on the opposite side of Castellaccio d'Edino. Her body was found in a cave. There are various caves in the area, but the one where Leah's body was found had been closed to the general public, as it's filled with a colony of bats and is the most isolated of all the caves. This cave is also known to be used for drug and arms trafficking. Leah was found half-naked face down on the gravel. Her bra and tank top were torn, and her sweater and jacket were pulled up over her head. She was naked from the waist down with her shoes, trousers and socks thrown nearby. She had a shoelace tied around her neck, suggesting that the killer or killers had tried to strangle her, but she was eventually shot at point blank in the heart. She had no defensive wounds and was probably killed on the night that she disappeared. The gamekeeper said that the barbed wire in the chain that protected the cape were cut by a tool, suggesting that the killer or killers had already planned where they would be, taking the victim during the police questioning. Several witnesses said that they had seen a dark, colored Fiat 128 outside of Leah's home on the day she disappeared. One neighbor said that there were 3 to 4 men inside the car, and at one point, one of the men got out of the car and checked the list of names on the doorbell of Leah's home before getting back inside the car and leaving. The car was seen again later that night, and a neighbor saw 2 men arguing inside the car. However, none of the witnesses ever saw the faces of the men. The next day, a car that matched the description the neighbors had given of the car, seen the night prior, was found set on fire in Pilastro. The car was found to be stolen from Bologna. A day earlier, a few hours after Leah was found, 3 calls were made to the police. The man on the phone said that he had seen a car idling in front of the cave on the night Leah disappeared, and said that he remembered the license plate number. The man would call again, just to make sure they got the information. He would call for the 3rd time and added a few more details. The car was found to belong to the owner of a club, who told the police that Leah was killed because of something related to her jewelry work. The man was then brought in for questioning, but would retract everything. The witnesses that lived near Leah did not recognize him as any of the men that they saw lingering in the car. The evening that Leah disappeared, with no evidence against him, the disco owner was cleared after 2 years. A drug dealer was arrested for another murder, and he told police that he knew who had killed Leah. And he gave 3 names to the police. Angelo Albania, already imprisoned in Germany, where he had been for the last 12 years. More than no PC and Carmelo Lopez. However, it was found that the drug dealer was confused and had described another murder that had happened a year prior to Leah's murder, in a nearby cave. All 3 accused men were put on trial, of which Marino and Carmelo were acquitted. But since Angela was in a Germany prison, and Germany refused to excavate him until after he had served his sentence, he was not acquitted 19 years later. He was finally tried and acquitted as well. In recent times, a DNA test on Leah's clothes and belongings showed traces of only female blood, and no other traces of DNA was found. There have been no suspects and no leads. Her case remains open and unsolved.